Welcome to another episode of New Game Plus. I am Jason, your host, and we are here to discuss a lot of Ubisoft this week. We got Far Cry New Dawn, we got our mailbag segment, we got Division 2, it's a lot of games, lots of good stuff to watch as always, but for now, something completely different.
Now, with Liam no longer doing movie reviews, I figure the only appropriate way to really pay homage to the 3 years he spent doing reviews, and well done, Liam, you definitely, I think you missed 2 that whole time, Jesus Christ. Anyway, was to do a review of Detective Pikachu in 90 seconds. And I guess the best way to describe Detective Pikachu is it is exactly as stupid and dumb as it sounds, and yet that works. As a result of that, I think the fact that it doesn't take itself too seriously, and yet at the same time still manages to hit a lot of these emotional high notes. Like, it starts off with the death of the father of the main character. There's lots of these kind of sad moments throughout, but then they do a really good job of universe building. I think the big thing to take away from Detective Pikachu is just how much they're going to do various ways of bringing that universe in. Like, they explain the universe, they use different kind of mechanics that exist only in the Pokemon universe, and then they resolve it using those mechanics. So it does a really good job of, even despite there's some references that are obviously real world references, it does a great job of actually keeping it inside of its own sphere. So I don't know, the best way I can describe Detective Pikachu is the stupidest crap you're ever going to see, but you will not waste your time going to see it. I think I enjoyed it way more than I thought. Ryan Reynolds was great. The young actor who played the main character was really good. Bill Nye is one of the main characters as well. Lots of actual decent acting chops in here. So maybe we're at a new zenith for video game movies, and Sonic won't be that bad.
I guess it's time to discuss Far Cry New Dawn. Now, we all know that I wasn't a big fan of Far Cry 5. I thought that for all of its setting in this kind of cultish, it had a lot of opportunities to really lambast American culture at the time, and it kind of pushed out, real hard pushed out. And the ending, oh my God, the ending. I have to spoil the ending a little bit just to discuss Far Cry New Dawn, which of course is set in the wasteland that is Montana, Hope County, Montana, after the bombs have dropped. That's right, they're doing a Fallout game now. And to be honest, it's still a better Fallout game than Fallout 76, but is that really saying much at the moment? The answer is, look, this is how Far Cry cycles tend to work. They have the numbered title, and then they have the spin-off, if you will. And it's always usually using the same map or using the same assets or whatever the case may be, except for probably Primal. New Dawn is the direct story sequel to 5, which makes it a little bit different in that sense, in that they've all kind of occupy the same world, but this one is actually set directly afterwards. And you play, it's 17 years after the bombs have dropped. You're trying to rebuild America. It's a little bit Johnny Appleseed. You're going across America trying to rebuild all these different things, and you end up, the character you play as ends up in Hope County as a result of trying to rebuild it. Now you've got the Highwaymen, who are the new bad guys that you're trying to fight. You deal with New Eden, you deal with the Peggies and all that kind of stuff, and lots of old faces show up as well. So it actually does a really good job of connecting those two worlds and being a reasonable expansion pack, because for all intents and purposes, that's what it is. The gameplay is fine. The level progression is a little bit more staged, as in it's a little bit more obvious that this level weapon is a level 1 weapon and a level 2 weapon. So it's more gamey in that sense, but then all of these games have always been insane collectathons anyway. The difference with this one is that it's got resources. So you have to find different resources to build weapons, to build facilities, all this kind of stuff. And it leaves a bit of a bitter taste in your mouth, because you can actually buy Far Cry coins, Far Cry currency that carries over in different save files, as if you're going to start a new save file. Anyway, my annoyance with that aside, the game itself is surprisingly good. I enjoyed playing this more than I did playing the story of Far Cry 5. I think it was a far more straightforward Mad Maxian kind of story. They have a little bit more fun with the writing. There's a couple of sneaky tongue-in-cheek references that I really enjoyed. So I can actually really recommend it as a sequel, especially as not a full-priced sequel/expansion pack to the game. But I also thought it was a good chance to discuss Ubisoft in general. So I made Donald, I dragged him in, and I said, we need to discuss Ubisoft. Donald, do you like Ubisoft, the video game company based in France?
Well, the company Ubisoft is now completely independent of its potential buyers, Vivendi.
So for those who don't understand, Vivendi's been sniffing around Ubisoft for, has to be 10, 15 years, like that. They've always been under threat of being bought by Vivendi, and I think finally they're big enough that it's Vivendi's it's not worth it.
And indeed, like, it's almost like there's never been a better time to be Ubisoft at the moment, because like we're looking at other companies, like we'll discuss EA later this episode, and you also have Activision, who aren't really there at the moment. All the big publishers, they're kind of not flatlining, but they're plateauing, where Ubisoft just continues to grow. Like their games are good and they are well received by its fans.
Yes.
And like it comes down to a number of factors, like one primary factor being that this is a company that's willing to support its games for the long term. It is very much leaning. The Ubisoft formula used to be open world, climb the tower, see the whole map. The Ubisoft formula is now games as a service, is the long tail. As in, this is a formula they kind of stumbled into by supporting Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege for as long as they did.
And like Siege was one of those interesting, like because he came out and it launched okay, it did okay. It was in an era where there were a lot of good shooters. It was around Overwatch time. It was just before Overwatch from memory.
Thereabouts, yeah.
Yeah, and so it got dominated in that esports scene straight away. But then people realised that Overwatch isn't great as an esport. I know I'm going to get angry letters for that, but it's really not great as an esport. What's better to watch is Siege. Siege is really fun to watch as an esport, and it's been interesting to see how the level of support as a result has ramped up, not down, since that point. Usually games go for the kind of the three phases: the launch, the what's what I'm thinking of, the ongoing content, and then the retention. You hit a point where you're like, we just want to retain as many people as possible. That's how the services usually work, and this is just, it's done like a weird, like it just keeps doing waves.
It keeps on growing and growing, and we've just we're towards about a month into season 4 at this point, and then this is the formula that's stretched to other Ubisoft games as well. They wouldn't expect to. Wildlands is still supported.
So Wildlands had a real bad launch. It was real rough at launch.
It was not a good game.
Even for Ubisoft standards, it was, I mean, it wasn't like eyeballs facing inwards kind of like Unity bad, but Jesus Christ, it wasn't good. And so like, you had this game that you think they would just let die, and they haven't. They've supported For Honor. Like, as someone who obviously we do a lot of FGC events, like it's never going to have an FGC presence, but they've still got such a strong, loyal player base.
And then for the games that aren't these always online, always ongoing games, we're getting this Far Cry expansion in Far Cry New Dawn, yeah.
And it was that thing of like, and it does strike me as a classic expansion pack. You know, like if you think of it like, you know, all the expansion packs for say Half-Life or, you know, all those kind of games where it was, you know, here is the core product, here's a different story told in the same universe, or here's a different thing we've done with it. That's what New Dawn is at its core. And I don't like mine as a concept. Here's the one that we're spending all the energy on making, you know, like, this is going to be the core product, and then we're going to have the product set as well that's not as expensive, does something a little bit different. Like, it works. Like New Dawn was way more fun than I thought it would be. I'm enjoying it way more than I thought I would for at all. So it's going to be interesting to see how their next. I mean, I wonder how this is going to affect games like Beyond Good and Evil, where I don't know how they're going to do it. Do you know what I mean?
Like, by all indications, that is going to lean into games as a service. There's always going to be like new stuff that you're going to have to connect to the Ubisoft service to play that game, and to get new missions, to get new hats, that sort of thing. Like, it kind of just raises the question. What do you reckon, Jason? Like, do you reckon they'll get too big for their britches with the games in the service route, and which will ultimately be their downfall?
And this is the problem, is like obviously Division and stuff like that, they lean into that real hard. Like there's games that they do already that lean into it. And you've got stuff like Assassin's Creed, where that is probably the least realistic title for them to roll into a service system. Do you know what I mean? Like the multiplayer of Assassin's Creed was always fun, but there's no real way for you to try and bring that into like a larger ongoing service. I guess you could just have, here is the base engine, and that's what a lot of them are doing, is they're making these base engines and then making games out of it from there. So I guess you could do it that way. But
or you can have daily quests.
I've seen that too. Like, I mean, it's got dailies. Everything's got fucking dailies now. You have to log in every day. Oh, just log in. Just, you know, log in. You know, like, even New Dawn has to log in. So, like, it is that thing of everything is becoming that kind of game as a service. And I think, again, this goes back to the conversation we've had a lot of times about China. Like, the Chinese love those kind of... They don't have that experience with console gaming especially, where we remember long games that go for 80 hours and it's all self-contained for the $100. That's not the gaming they grew up with, so that's not what they're used to. And they're driving so much of the market. You can get a sliver of that Chinese market. You manage to make it through the process. it's worth it anyway. You know what I mean?
And now we're seeing Nintendo enter that market as well.
So it's going to be interesting to see how the Japanese handle that. But Donald, I don't know. Have I convinced you to play Far Cry New Dawn?
I've actually played a little bit of Far Cry New Dawn, and like from the little bits that I've played, it seems vibrant. It seems, as you say, it seems like a small, happy, fun time. But then again, we are not coming off the back of Fallout 76. We have Rage 2 coming out this year, and not to mention 2 other post-apocalyptic games that came around this time too. So to even poke its head slightly above this post-apocalyptic space, it's kind of to its credit. Hey,
That's true. Fuck, Fallout 76 was bad though.
the console wars are in a quiet place at the moment. Sony and Microsoft are busy working on their new boxes, whilst Nintendo is busy purchasing a new vault for all the money that it will make when the new Pokémon Switch games come out. However, all's not quiet on the platform battlefront, as the war has moved to an entirely unexpected theatre: PC launches. Now, late in 2018, Epic Games, the developers of Fortnite and the owners of the 3 vaults next to Nintendo's, decided to spend some of these Fortnite riches by creating its own gaming store, the imaginatively titled Epic Games Store. Now, if you're playing at home, and especially if you're doing so on a PC, this is yet another PC launcher to add to the increasingly stuffed toolbar of launchers, almost reminiscent of the bloated toolbars of our 90s Netscape browsers. I half expect Clippy to come ask if I need help with purchasing pipe dream cosmetics. Now, we have the following launchers to choose from. You have the Epic Game Store, Steam, Battle.net, Origin, Uplay, GOG Galaxy, Discord, Twitch, Itch.io, Bethesda Launcher, Oculus, Windows Store, the upcoming Google Stadia, and Netflix Interactive Films, which recently added the Bear Grylls Choose Your Own Adventure series, U vs. Wild, also known as Bear Grylls Urine Drinking Simulator 2019. The correct choice, by the way, is to always drink more urine. But really, when it comes to certain games, there is only one choice. Literally. In the months since launching the Epic Games Store, it has obtained the time-to-exclusive rights to sell a whole range of games on PC, including Borderlands 3, Rocket League, and Metro Exodus. Indeed, Metro Exodus was meant to release on Steam on 15th of February, but 2.5 weeks before this, it was pulled from Steam and then shifted to the EGS. If only there were a word to describe this sudden departure, this egress, this exit. I guess we'll never know. To say that the gaming community reaction has been heated is an understatement. Social media is alight with anger anytime the EGS pops up in the news. And sure, accessing it is as easy as creating a free account, but people are reluctant to make the move to this new launcher for a variety of reasons. So let's go through them, shall we? In its current state, the EGS lacks many of the features of other PC launchers. I've compared it with Steam, Battle.net, Origin, and Uplay, and out of those 5 launchers, the EGS is the most resource intensive on your PC. It is the only one that is missing cloud saves, and it is the only one that doesn't accept Australian dollars, despite the EGS roadmap claiming as such. I guess our dollary-doos aren't good enough for you, Epic. And indeed, the roadmap of future EGS features is a catalogue of things that we've come to expect from PC launchers, and their absence from the EGS is glaring. Users are still awaiting things like mod support, gifting, and, most curiously, a shopping cart. Sure, others are guilty of this, but the fact that the online gaming store is missing the shopping cart is a metaphor so on the nose. Zack Snyder is planning on using it in his next tire fire of a film. The odd side effect of this EGS hate is that people are championing Steam as the hero of this new platform war. After all, people have built up over a decade of friends, badges, and games that they'll definitely play one day. Spoiler alert, they won't. But Steam isn't exactly a model citizen in this PC launcher space. Discoverability of games is a real issue on that store. Trying to find an interesting new release is like trying to find high literature in an adult bookstore. You may be looking for Charles Dickens, but you're more likely to find Charles Dickens. And if you think I'm exaggerating, look at the amount of new games that are tagged with nudity and sexual content. And sure, Steam has an automated refund process, but it only got to this point after being dragged kicking and screaming, including by Australia's full federal court, which found that Steam's operator Valve had breached Australia's consumer laws. So, you're welcome, world. Australia has given you Steam refunds, Wi-Fi, and one of the best multiplayer games out there, Goon of Fortune. Now, ain't that a great... I'm receiving word that Goon of Fortune is now an Epic Games Store exclusive. Huh. There is one other area that Steam is falling behind in, where EGS actually has the upper hand, and that is developer payouts. Developers that sell their games on the EGS will receive 88% of sales revenue instead of the 70% that Steam offers. And surprisingly, Epic doesn't pay this out in Fortnite V-Bucks. Steam has remained oddly quiet in response to Epic's aggressive posture, save for a few blog posts expressing corporate disapproval at the games moving away from its platform. Meanwhile, Epic is firing salvos all over the place. As recently as late April, Epic Games CEO Tim Sweeney, seen here moments before taking another swim in his vault of Fortnite money, added fuel to this fire by tweeting that if Valve was to match the 88% payout, Epic would hastily organize a retreat from exclusives and consider putting their own games on Steam. And you thought I was being overwrought with this war metaphor. Now, let's put all this into perspective. This is distinct from the console war. You don't have to purchase a whole new $100 box to play Borderlands 3 on PC, unless you insist on the fancy collector's edition. But even within the bubble of this PC launcher war, the Epic Games Store will eventually implement its laundry list of features and reach parity with all the other PC launchers. And at that point, Valve and the others will have to respond to this aggressive competition by improving their product. Who knows? Maybe this newfound competition will actually make the PC launcher space better for gamers. Until then, let's leave this new platform war for the moment. What's to come next? Will Steam call Epic's bluff on developer payouts? Will Epic get lost on its roadmap and have to stop and ask for directions? Which PC launcher does Clippy prefer? I reckon Clippy is a conscientious objector to this whole PC platform war, ironic considering its love of minesweeping. And that is everything that has happened in the world, ever.
Welcome back to New Game Plus, and despite this sounding terrifying, Donald's about to invade Washington. It's not quite what it sounds like though.
The current market for online action role-playing games, you know, looter shooters, is currently very crowded, with Destiny 2, Anthem and Warframe all vying for your time and money. And now we have another entrant with Tom Clancy's The Division 2 from Massive Entertainment and Ubisoft. Now, let's get straight to the thing that you care about the most. How's the shooting and how's the looting? And I'm happy to report that the moment-to-moment gameplay is satisfying. The gunplay cannot match the lofty highs set by Destiny, well, nothing can, but the gun handling is still very enjoyable, whether you're whittling down your enemies with a submachine gun or hitting their critical points with a marksman rifle. And the enemies in Division 2 are bullet sponges, so you won't be able to run and gun your way through. Instead, you'll have to utilize cover, flanking, and the occasional gadget to clear a room. Your enemies, however, will have the exact same abilities at their disposal, which makes combat a much more active endeavor than the standard looter shooter. In short, you'll have to have your wits about you and think tactically if you want to survive and score the best gear. Which brings me to the other half of the looter shooter, and the loot grind is just as good. Unlike other games where loot feels random and incremental, I got the sense with the Division 2 that I was always making meaningful progress. And you're not just chasing the highest number either. You have the option to optimize your loadouts with bonuses based on your gear attributes, with guns awarding perks if you maximize or even minimize certain armor attributes. There will be plenty of opportunity to chase this loot with the Division's endgame. After you complete the story missions for the first time, they are invaded by the Black Tusk, an elite PMC with more abilities than your previous foes. Even though you'll be going through the same mission environments, combat plays out much more differently and makes it all worth the revisit. The marquee missions in this game are the Strongholds, the 20 to 30 minute missions akin to the strikes in Destiny. There is also an 8-player raid, which as of recording has not been released, but it is part of the free content that will be added to the Division 2 over its first year, and will include story missions, modes, and character specializations. Now, it's a good thing that the moment-to-moment gameplay and greater loot grind are able to keep you playing, because the story and the lore certainly won't. A pandemic has caused a global crisis around the world, and it is up to the agents of the Strategic Homeland Division working out of the White House to blah 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 blah. I started tuning out at about this point, but that's because the game did as well, which is a shame, because the Washington DC setting is well implemented. It feels like Washington DC, and not just the TV version of it. And the variety of environments on offer, including abandoned banks, aerospace museums, and of course the Lincoln Memorial, they all give each of the game's missions a distinct flavor and visual identity, even if you are ultimately doing the exact same thing over and over again. The Division takes its varied and vibrant setting and does absolutely nothing with it. For a game set in the heart of US politics, it squanders the opportunity to say anything about post-apocalyptic America other than, guns be good? This even extends to the people that you run into. The first Division game gave personality to the enemy faction, such as the Rikers prison escapees or the gang made up of sanitation workers. In the Division 2, you have none of that. Enemies are just moving target practice in forms of generic costume. Even the main heroes and villains of this story are relegated to names and nothing more. I've played through the main story and I cannot attribute more than a single adjective to any of these characters. And that's not just my inattention. The game does zero to imbue its NPCs with any personality. Which is a shame that the game had to sacrifice this story and setting. But that kind of falls by the wayside when I'm retaking a control point for the upteenth time just to get some better knee pads, and then doing it all over again. The Division 2 is, despite its story lacking, it is a refined and rewarding looter shooter, and in a market that's teeming with them, its number is one of the highest.
Did you get it? Did you get my stupid joke? Doesn't matter. Moral of the story is, we're here to discuss Division 2 with Donald. I've got him here on the couch next to me now. Hello, Donald.
Hello. Can we just finish this up quickly so I can get back to the grinding, please?
Yeah, right. So this is the thing. You've always been the loot shooter kid. As much as you'd like to pretend to be, you know, the arty indie guy, if you throw a loot shooter in front of you, it's all over.
I enjoy mini meats in the cultural stew, Jason.
Oh my lord. Anyway, and that is true because you do, and that's the reason that Division 2 was a good review for you in the sense that you do play Destiny. You're across like what these kind of games do well and what they don't do well. And that leads me into the discussion about Anthem.
Yes, that's a game where there's a lot to process with that game because this is another loot shooter.
Yeah.
It is EA's and BioWare's big vaunted loot shooter project, like many years in development, announced like 5-6 years ago, and it's come out basically with a whimper.
Yeah. And it's not, I would say it's not even a whimper. I would say that it showed up and it bleated for a while, and then they decided that it was probably, it's okay, just leave it in the corner away from the other things while it just like slowly dies or whatever. I mean, it is hemorrhaging players so badly that they're struggling to deal with matchmaking at the moment.
And to be fair, I'm also running into that issue with the Division 2 on PC of everything that isn't extreme endgame. If you want to matchmake and you kind of have to for certain missions, then you're waiting 5 minutes, or you need to find a clan mate, or just be good.
Yeah, and I guess because that is the thing, like a lot of these games are geared towards, as much as there's a PC scene, they're geared toward console. You know what I mean? Like I'm sure that the problems you're having on PC perhaps wouldn't be emulated on, say, PS4 or Xbox.
No, like it depends on the game really. Destiny 2, I think you've got a thriving PC community, but other games like the Division, like Anthem, arguably, where the scene is very much more on console than it is on PC. But then you have games like Warframe.
So Warframe is the. It reminds me of kind of Rainbow Six. Rainbow Six to esports is Warframe to loot shooter. In that, it was always this game. It's Warframe. You know, a lot of people play. Blah blah blah. And then it kind of, and then everyone's playing goddamn Warframe. Everyone's talking about Warframe, all the changes they've made to the things.
The reason why Warframe was successful is because Destiny 1 kind of flailed at launch. For the first year, it was not a good loot shooter by any stretch of the imagination. People wanted that sort of game. They found it in Warframe, and then just from there, the game continues to grow and grow. Where like it is the quiet success of the loot shooting genre.
And I think that is always the kind of the problem that people have, especially when we come from a blockbuster gaming world where not like you have to return it after 6 days. You come from this world of AAA gaming where you have to, it has to be a success. It has to sell 10 million copies for it to be successful. That's not true. If you have a strong community of even like 500,000 people, that's usually enough to carry a video game.
You can't say the same thing about Anthem nowadays, though.
That's
like
true.
we're talking about the community that's fallen and down.
Yeah.
But that's just because, well, the entire story of Anthem just seems like just BioWare slowly falling down in slow motion. Like there's a story reported about the development of the game saying that the game, like even though it's been in pre-production for like 6 years, it was effectively made in 18 months. That the final product was a byproduct of compromise upon compromise, and that the working conditions there were abhorrent, to say the least.
And you can see that in the game. It feels like as much as it tries to have this deep lore and have this deep, like, nothing seems like it seems like the person who did this didn't talk to the person who did this, and while they fit together in the same game, they don't fit together as mechanics. You know what I mean? Like especially flying and stuff like that. Like flying's cool. Everyone likes being Iron Man, but then it's like now I got to land and now I got to shoot and now I got to do all this, and it's like
Or
way
I want
less
to fly
interesting.
endlessly, but then we have to remember that we only have this X size map, but we don't want players breaking it, so we have to have arbitrary limitations of how much you can fly. And when you're limiting what everyone can agree is a good, fun part of the game,
Yeah.
you have issues there.
I think that is kind of the problem as well. They've taken BioWare away from their core gameplay. Like, as much as I didn't like Mass Effect, as much as I didn't like, this game and that game that BioWare made, I've never been a big fan of BioWare. That was their shtick, you know what I mean? Jade Empire, all these kind of games. Never really enjoyed their games, but I got it. This does not seem like anything that would normally be a BioWare game.
No, and like they certainly had their ambitions trying to reach this point, but as I was alluding to before, it's like there's just internal mismanagement, internal indecision that just resulted in them just spluttering out whatever they could. And like, here's the thing, like we've got a good 5+ years since Destiny 1 came out, so we've got theoretically have this history of loot shooters, like of the mistakes that all of those games have made. BioWare should have learned those lessons, and maybe they did. But they just didn't have the wherewithal to sort of act upon it. Meanwhile, compare and contrast with the Division 2, they have very much learned from their mistakes in the first Division game. They've learned from other companies' mistakes, like Destiny 2. Like that was a game which, again, should have launched out of the gates fantastically, but it took until year 1 to get really good. Division 2, on the other hand, like it has a very strong day 1 positive impression, and it's only going to get better from there. At least it feels like it's only going to get better from there.
And that is another episode of New Game Plus. Thank you very much for joining me, Donald. Do not forget to check us out at newgameplus.tv, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. We're all across all those kind of platforms. Don't forget, BAM is coming up very, very soon. It should be next week as you watch this episode. Get down to BAM 11. It's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you next week.